welcome to another exciting week for this tips for chiller tips tutorials. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is just a little composed effect for what the Venom goo, the alien Venom goo is going to be created and it's going to do here on our scene. So we're going to take few steps for that. Using only modifiers, we're going to create this alien goo effect. It's pretty easy once you get the hang of this, and we're going to create a vertex and then use the skin modifier. We're going to extrude it and then create these branch-like shapes. And after using all those modifiers, we're going to keep on adding more effects, post effects, and then later on render with a farming service called Leonardo Render. You probably heard of this in the Blender conference, and it's such an amazing service. So let's get started. Right now, what you're seeing here is just a little preview on what we're going to do on the modeling part using the skin modifier. So you can branch from there any other vertex. Then we're going to add displacement modifiers. We're going to use one to create the irregular shapes, and then the second one to create the detailed shapes, the detailed blob shapes, as you can see right here. So it will appear that the blobs are going up, and then we're going to deform the entire shape of this created mesh by using a curve deform. So we're going to sculpt a curve, and then we're going to deform this mesh by scaling the original position and scaling it along the z-axis. Then we're going to use hooks. Hooks are empties that are going to be used to control the curve. So in this case, we select a vertex, then we press Ctrl H to create a hook. And from there on, we can go to the empty properties to switch the shape of the empty. I really like to work with ball-shaped empties, so in that way I can animate them as well. And then we're going to move on into using markers. In this way, we're going to use the timeline to create a special frame on the time where we are going to switch cameras. In this case, I'm going to start first with the camera 01, and then later on I'm going to create another marker and then attach it onto that with Ctrl B using bind command. It's only available while you hover the timeline. In this case, the camera selected is going to be binded onto the marker location in the timeline. And then we will move on onto Blender 2.8 to render out a real-time EEVEE shading network. In this case, I'm showing you here how to disable the world background, or you can also use the transparent option from Film on the Renders tab. So you can have an invisible world, but yet still get all the reflections you need on this goo material. I just parented this, and then we're going to review how great a speed you can get by using the Leonardo render farm and all of your renders into your own machine. We're also going to be using Blender 2.8 to create this nifty effect made by Blender, made with Blender actually, and the grease pencil deformers and effects, so that later we can compose it over the video that we are going to create using this Blender technique tutorial. And finally, we're going to add some color grading, some nifty effects, and we're going to take the image from the right to look like the image to the left. Look at this. It's amazing. It's really, really nice. And then we're going to add some other effects that will help us push even more the realism for a cinematic trailer or a cinematic short video. So let's start by creating a plane. Then I merge every point I have with Alt M, merge at center. Then I add a skin modifier. I select the vertices, I switch to vertex mode and then select it and then press the letter E. With the letter E I can extrude however I would like. And this is the way it's going to look shaded, but right now I'm going to switch over to wireframe. Why is this? Because I want to be able to touch other points, other vertices, and then extrude from there. You can also scale the thickness of the skin modifier as well. If you press Ctrl A, you can push and pull your thickness. So right now what I'm looking for here is just a general tree-like shape. Why do I do this? Now there's this video on YouTube about this guy talking about how symbiotes can live with their hosts, and it's a very nice and interesting scientific point of view. He's using the Venom movie to compare how these organisms in nature really do live with their hosts. And it was an interesting talk, and there he described that these symbiotes get some sort of crawl effect, like how could I say it, fungus, like mold. If you look to them under the microscope, you will find that all these ramifications, all these tree looking like structures are really part of their nature. This is how they really move. And he said on the video that if a real life Venom was to be, existing, then the velocity, or rather the speed to how this mold, this alien goo, this alien mold will grow will be several times faster, but it will ramify itself like we're watching right here. And this is the idea with this tree-like structure. So therefore you can select the vertices, push G to grab and move. And if you take a look on solid view, you're going to get something like this. This is exactly what we want, but everything is just like solid with the same thickness. And what we want to do, first of all, obviously, is to rename this, and then we're going to add a subsurface modifier. I'm sorry, I always call this subsurface modifier. It's a subdivision. I'm going to call it by quicks sub D. So then we add a sub D that to smooth the result. And let me open another window. We need our outliner because we're going to duplicate this, and then we're going to rename this as the cage. I wanted to use this as a cage deformer to test how it will deform inside of the original shape, and it worked, only that it wasn't like really friendly to animate. It works. I mean, when you bind them by cage deform, it will deform, of course, but it will not allow you to grow and deform. I needed to do that, and you can either do it two ways, either by using modifiers, deforming by curves, or you can use a lattice effects, FDD for the 3D Max users. So now we're going to add a displace modifier, the first one that is going to help us to uneven the surface of this model. So let's just first create the texture. Over to the texture tab, and we're going to create a noise texture using the voronoi pattern. From here on, we're going to make sure that this scale is not as big as it is right now. We need to switch this. You can try other modes here, whatever you like the best. And I'm going to scale this effect. So see how we're going to get this unevenness over the surface. This is the first displacement, so I beg you, please always have the sub D modifier as the last operator. This is very important to soften your modifiers. So this first displacement that we used previously was to uneven the surface, and so we renamed it. Now we're going to use a second displace modifier with another texture. We're going to create another new texture, and then we're going to use that as a blob animation displacement. So let's go and create a new texture right there so that it can be added. So now we can switch the textures, and also let's use, I don't know, let's try clouds. That kind of looks right. Yes, hard. Let's have some very contrasty clouds. This is what we're looking for. Excellent. Now let's see if we can, scale this so that it will give the appearance to be blobbing. We want this to be blobbing because what we're going to be moving on the lattice also will add up to this animation on the timeline and will help you sell the effect that the goo is alive. Now if we see the final result, maybe we can variate the texture using different algorithms to generate that blob noise. This one kind of works. This is too planty. Looks like a plant. No, I don't think this is gonna work. Okay, but once we get this working, I think on the end I decided over to clouds. Yes, I think this works. Yeah, totally, this works. By scaling the appearance of this texture, I'm getting the blob effect. Now, one thing I really like to recommend to you is that the values somehow reach up to 5, only 5. But if you want higher values, just type them in. Like for example, in this example, I'm creating a value of 10. With the value of 10, I can also animate in the timeline from 5 to 10, which is the most prominent effect. And right now I'm going to activate the keyboard keys on the screen so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to go into the 0 frame of the timeline, and then I'm going to press I, letter I, so that I create the first keyframe, and then I'm going to see how the effect is reacting all the way through frame 120, which has the value of the size in 10. Now I'm going to press M, duplicate the object first, obviously, then I'm going to press M to move it to another layer. Now with the coming of 2.8, we don't have the limitations of 20 layers. We can have more than 20 layers, and layers are called collections. So I'm going to name this displays blobbing effect, or something that identifies this. Very good. Now this is looking pretty amazing. The goo effect is kicking in right at the time, and then it goes all the way up to 10. Now let's variate this some little more, because the strength of the effect is not going to be that much prominent. I think this is what I'm looking for, kind of a liquidy shape, liquid shape. And let's move the operator so that the sub D, it's the last one. And please, I cannot beg you enough that you always name your modifiers, name your object, name your layers, name your effects, name your materials, name everything, because you don't know if probably you would come to this scene 2 or 3 years later, and then you don't know what you did. If you created something and you do not rename it, then you don't know what parameters other people, can use this scene or touch or move or understand what you did there. It's kind of like a good professional ethics that you do this, because just like programmers need to comment their code, just like so, 3D artists need to comment every effect they have. I even named the things on After Effects, by the way. This has got to be a good custom of rule of thumb that you would use as a CG artist. to name your stuff accordingly. Okay, enough of that, and let's continue to duplicate this. Just for the sake of it, we're going to create a backup first, and then we're going to hide it, just so that in any case that something goes wrong, I can go to my original mesh. Now let's create the material. It's really easy, it's just a principal shader. And also I'm going to add a background world image with a highlight with HDRI highlights, I'm sorry. And so this material will reflect as I scale this specular all the way up, and we are also going to work with the clear coat. And right now I'm just doing a test. This is a modifier, a curve modifier that is on the x-axis, I think it is. You see the interesting forms it takes on a very nudgy curve, but that's not what we're going to end up doing. So I'm going to simplify this curve, because too many points is going to make this mesh not work correctly. Now, one of the other things you have to have in mind is that whenever you create a curve and you modify it, somehow rotate it, scale it, or translate it, please don't forget to apply transformations. I know probably this is just common sense, common ground for old 3D veterans on Blender, but not really on the new artists coming into Blender. They don't know why we should apply transformations, but I can say that it is the similar concept that we have on 3D Studio Max or Modo or Softimage, to freeze out the transformation, leave everything at zero. Whatever you do to transform or are moving your curve into the scene, you really need to set everything into zero ground. And the only way to do it here, the freeze transform in Blender, is called apply transformations. So that's another term I want you to get clear. And such, let's move this onto the center. That little dot you see there is the center. It's called the origin here on Blender. It's not called the center, it's called the origin. And so I'm moving the curve over to the origin so that whenever I want to manipulate that, it will manipulate and transform my object from that origin. So that's why it's important to set everything at the origin, because you're going to get strange deformations like we saw before. So again, we have too many curves here. They are very difficult for the shape to follow. So I'm trying to make some space here using the O proportional tool. If you press the letter O, you're going to get the proportional tool, and if you roll your mouse wheel up or down, you're going to make that proportional area editing big or small. Right now I'm on edit mode. You can select the curve, go into edit mode, you can select the vertices, and then press delete, or rather X. When you do this, it's going to ask you if you really want to delete the vertices. This is something I already posted on some other post some years ago, that delete, save, and copy or any other operation, day-to-day operation, should not have a confirmation dialog. This is something I've been discussing on forums, on other Blender communities, because it's so obvious to do these things that I think users will get drawbacks from using the software just because of these redundant dialogues. I even conducted a survey to ask about how obnoxious this thing is, and we got near 300 replies on that, and obviously I think it was 78% of the people responded that it's really, really obnoxious to have to confirm something so obvious as to save or delete. You can always undo, so why the question? I mean, it doesn't do any sense. Again, I apologize. I will not be editing this audio this time because this tutorial is really long and I really want you to get the hang of this. Right now I'm scaling and I'm deforming already. I applied a curve deform modifier over to the branched goo mesh, and then I'm scaling it along the curve. So see, it's got a curve modifier and then I'm scaling using the deformer of the curve. So that way we're going to get the appearance of the goo growing. This is what we are interested in. And if we had more time, this is kind of a middle of the road tutorial. If we had some more time, we could set up some drivers that the thickness of the alien goo will remain the same even if it's scaling all the way up to the curve. But I'm not going to do that on this tutorial. It's kind of geeky and most likely directed to TD people, technical director people, and as such I am kind of thinking about doing that kind of things, that kind of tutorials, more advanced tutorials rather, because I've seen many really basic and introductory tutorials for people that is just coming to Blender, and that's really nice because Blender 279 has a lot to offer as well as Blender 2.8 with all its new interface and new tools. And this is the reason why I'm doing this a very long tutorial, because I really wanted to get the details on both of the softwares at the moment, and this is before the final release of Blender. So please, if you're watching this after the final 2.8 Blender release, please don't write to me, this is fixed, this is done, because I know it's done. I'm just doing this before time. Actually, I'm doing this while the Blender conference is going on at Amsterdam, so you can see that I'm pretty interested on you getting this tutorial just right, even though the Venom movie just passed this weekend premiere, this 2 weeks actually since it premiered, and I was rather expecting some other tests before launching this full tutorial, so as I was busy as well doing office stuff, delivering deadlines with some clients, but we finally found the time and now I'm doing this. So the next thing we're going to do is to create on edit mode inside the curve the hook modifiers. What are hooks? Hooks will help you to drive the curve so that you can control the location of the vertex that you have a hook on. Think of it this way. It's just like a controller that you will automatically add with the help of Blender to move that influence in the curve steepness. So if I grab this empty, let me see, this vertex, and then Control H to create a new hook to the object, I'm going to get this null, I'm going to get this empty, Control H, I'm going to create another one, and now I'm going to switch the properties of this one over to here, and then selecting sphere, because just like I already mentioned, it's easier for me to move and manipulate a shape of a sphere. So I'm going to set a keyframe, automatic keyframe. I'm going to first set the keyframe on location, then I'm going to move just a little bit over the timeline, and then I'm going to move. See how easy it is to manipulate the curve? And then you get this animation. So rigging the goo, the alien goo, it's even easier. You can even do more things after the goo has already grown. And since you're already working on automated keyframes on Blender 279, this feature is on 2.8 as well. You can insert, that's why you press the I of insert new key, the shortcut to insert new key, the letter I, and then move on to another time frame on the timeline and then press another location, like in this example, and it will automatically register a keyframe since we are using automatic keyframes. And see your results right there. The alien goo is growing, but something weird is going on with the mesh, and that has got to be with the sub D modifier. The sub D modifier is tweaking, or rather flipping, some of the faces on this mesh. Now remember, everything here is already created and stacked. The Blender modifier list processes itself from the bottom to the top. That means that the bottom modifier is the first modifier, it's the last modifier to be processed. So in this case, we can even go back to the skin modifier and continue to move or modify or subdivide this mesh. And right now I just created a group, and now you're going to get a new option with group instance. What this does is that whatever you created on the previous group is going to be created as a, how can I say this, as a lighter version of your group. So in my case, I have a lot of deformers, I have a curve deform, I have a scale animation, everything that's there. If I group instantiate it, I'm going to get a lighter version of the same object, and anything and everything I do on the original parent or the original objects, it's going to get propagated through the instances. In this way, I can push and create many other alien goo movements, animations, tweakings. I can even tweak further these things, create even more modifiers stacks on them, and then create new groups from that. And I will still get the new instance groups. So this is an amazing feature that Blender has, because it will not occupy as much RAM as the original models that you grouped. It's a lighter version. It's like a low weight version, I can say it that way. And you even have filters here, so you can go to groups or the scene, and you will notice this new icon appearing right here to make you notice that this is an instance group. Now you can see them all grow. Blender is not lagging. You can see the vertex count up there. It's almost 45k polygons, and it's not lagging at all. And all these modifiers are live. So now let's create the lattice. Now that I have all these groups together on this space, they are transforming, they are growing on the curve. I want to place a lattice modifier, or rather a lattice mesh first, because that's the way Blender does it. A lattice mesh first, and then we're going to subdivide this on the properties. If you go over here, you're going to get the options to subdivide this lattice even more. And now we need to tell every group, or rather the only one master group, to get deformed by this lattice. So we're going to select the original group, because all the others do not have that property to work with other modifiers. So we need to create them on the original parent, in this case the original object. And then let me name this accordingly for the curve. And now let's create another one modifier using this lattice, and it's gonna ask me which one I would like to use. So I check the picker, click the picker, and click over the lattice. And now this lattice is going to influentiate not 100% or 1, but at 0.8, I think it was. I left that value there, and then I'm going to tell it to be the form with simple deform. This lattice also will allow more modifiers to modify the shape, the general shape of the lattice. And this lattice in return is modifying the shape of the goo, the alien goo mesh. So once you get this workflow going on, you can rig and then you can use the lattice to still modify or tweak even further the alien goo effect. You can see it right there. It's like a growing vine. Now this is a very old technique from back in the days. I'm talking about, I don't know, the 1990s, where there were not that many specialized 3D tools. So I'm talking about the lightweight first periods of apparitions and also Caligari through space. I know this is ancient history for most of you, but I just want to get that point across because sometimes old techniques still make good tricks on the present. And in this case, the alien goo is looking pretty nice. I'm not spending that much time in animating this, although you can, because you are a better Blender animator than I am. So you're probably gonna get the idea pretty quick, and let's get going. So now that we have this alien goo growing, we just tweaked it, rotate it. Let's keep on saving because you don't know when Blender can crash. But I can say pretty much this Blender 2.79 is a very rock stable version. I can even render stuff and continue to tweak something and it will not fall away and it will not crash. This is just amazing for a free open source software that can guarantee that your render will not fail. I mean, it's just too huge to reuse and to deny actually. You just take those kind of offers. So right now I'm going to animate the camera just to test out how it could go along. And the general idea here will be that I will be using the timeline to switch cameras, and then later on I'll just use that sequence directly onto the compositing part. So let's just Shift Z actually. You can even create preset sizes to render. And right now I'm going to create a new folder so I can save everything I will render out on this folder for my compositing later on. So we check everything is in place. We already have turned off everything we don't need on the outliner. Let's make sure that use OpenSubD is checked. This is the Pixar algorithm to smooth out meshes, and it's core implemented on 2.8. And even so, on Blender 2.79 you still have that option there, so you can mark it and check it. And right now I'm using Blender 2.8. Now this is important. Why did I come here? Because I wanted to demonstrate how fast Blender 2.8 on EEVEE and cycles is rendering. Now at the moment I'm going to switch here to EEVEE just for a second. Let's switch this top toolbar over here, and I'm going to press this little icon right there which represents the render, real-time render. And see, right now I just push play and I'm seeing my camera and everything on my scene moving along. I can see reflections, I can see the modifiers, everything is running on real time. Actually, it's running so fast, I think I'm going to tweak the camera. But right now, this is a desired effect. Just wonderful. But this is not making an impact. I mean, this scene is pretty much like a real quick test, but it's not selling me anything. It's not creating emotion, it's not telling me a story. It's just a simple thing just growing there. And probably you would like this from a single view and then recompose it on 2D, but let's add some techniques, some Hollywood techniques on here. So let's create a camera and let's create a focus area for that camera. Now let me name this as camera 01 because this is a camera. Pressing Ctrl Alt 0 on the numpad, I'm going to automatically switch Blender into that camera. My view is going to be converted into the view of that camera. It's like matching view, like when you have on 3D Max match view, and I think that option is also on Modo. But here on Blender you select the camera first and then you go Ctrl 8. You locate yourself on the 3D space and then you create this view by using Ctrl L Alt 0 numpad. So right now I'm going to create a sphere that will represent camera 01 focus. Now this is a very good technique because this camera is rig free. It doesn't have like a zoom, it doesn't have many like automatic options to look at constraints, although you can add them. But on Blender, whenever you create a camera, you would like also to add some of these things into the camera. So right now I'm going to select this sphere as the focus for the camera. Where do you do that? Well, you select the camera first. Actually, let me correct something. It looks like I left on the automatic animation button, and therefore I have some animation I need to erase first. So I wanted to talk about this, the dope sheet. Now the dope sheet has all these keyframes that even though you have not selected are appearing on the objects. Now how is this? Well, this is a very interesting and long subject, but what you need to know is that if you want to select something, you need to press B, because this is a supra mode key for box select. So right now I'm going to select the camera. So I tend to open a floating window by pressing Ctrl Alt U to get the user preferences, and then I switch quickly to the dope sheet so I can have a floating window whenever I need to have closer to my view to create the animation. So right here you press B to select things and G to move them, and then you can also press X to constrain the movement. I'm going to talk about the super keys later on another tutorial that is already explained on my PDF guide for the XSI mod theme, because I don't pretend to get you as a new user in Blender to dive into the deep concepts without first explaining them theory first. So let's divide these windows and let's create a general view over here, and let's switch here to the timeline, probably not the dope sheet. Yes, dope sheet here, camera up there, and on to the left a general view for this effect to work. Now you can see the ball right there. I don't need that ball to render, that sphere to be rendered. So if you switch everything off, then you will not see it, of course. It will not appear on the render, but you won't either actually get it on the general viewport, and we need it because this is the prime focus for the effect. So right now you see my f-stop, it's at 0.1, and the focus object is set on that sphere. And that sphere right now is going to be parented onto the camera. So wherever the camera moves, it has a fixed focus position on this sphere, and that is what we want. But we can uncheck the ray visibility for the sphere, and then it will not get rendered by cycles. Now that's a more interesting approach, and we can also switch the representing mode on the viewport from texture to wireframe. Now that's more appealing, that's more like it. That's how we can work. Now let's work some animation here. Select the camera. Select the sphere and then select the camera, then press Ctrl P to get them parented, and then keep offset. That way, wherever I move the camera, the focus zone, it's always going to be locked onto the sphere. Now this is a very old trick. It's a way old trick. I think it comes back from 2006, I think it is, on Blender. Anyways, now you know how to get the focus fixed, and you can also animate the ball, that sphere, to go far or near the camera, so you can get that out of focus effect, that bokeh effect. It's pretty nice. Now this is looking much interesting. I can rotate this camera a little bit. My automatic keyframe button is already activated, if you can notice down there on the timeline, and it's working pretty nice. Now that I have this first camera, I'm thinking about adding a second camera. Let me find an interesting position, probably around here. Let me switch this, rotate it a little bit more. Yes, probably there. Now I'm on frame 60. I'm going to set a new position and rotation keyframe. Oops, I'm sorry, I forgot to put the first initial position and rotation keyframe. So let me reposition this camera again. Let me rotate it a little bit on Z, on local Z axis. And let's save. Don't forget to save. Alright, it's growing pretty nice, and the camera is moving along with them. Now I want to create a second camera, probably somewhere around, let me see, let's calculate the timeline. Let's create first the camera. Let's rename it camera 02. I'm sorry, my keyboard is not responding. Probably the battery's low. Okay, and then you can see there where's the menu to set the active camera. In this case, Control Alt Numpad 0. First you select the camera and then you press Control Alt Numpad 0 to make it the active camera. This is important because sometimes people don't know how to switch cameras. And now I just created another sphere. I just pressed F6. That's a floating window that will help you parameterize your mesh. But in this case, the default values were alright. I didn't need that much subdivisions on this sphere. So now, right now, I'm going to name this sphere as Camera 02 Focus. Because we're going to do exactly the same thing that we did before, and that was to go on the objects list under focus and then set the f-stop all the way down to 0.1 or 1.0, depending on how you would like your shallow effect on depth. I really like the bokeh effect, so I'm going to play with the blades and also the value here. Oh, let's not forget to disable on cycles rendering that I'm sorry, I have the camera selected, that's why I'm not seeing any changes. Oh, right, here we go. Visibility, uncheck camera, save, and now let's parent them. This is camera 1. This is camera 1. I'm sorry, that's camera 2. Camera 1 is the one down there. Now this is camera number 2, and it already has the focus fixed. Now on this frame, on frame 22, I'm going to set a keyframe. And now I'm going to tell it that from this keyframe on, I'm going to have another different movement for this animation. I want the alien goo to grow towards the camera to create a more interesting approach, sort of tension, so that the camera is experimenting this alien goo first person. So there we have it. Looks nice. Perfect. But now I need a way to tell Blender to switch cameras at render time. So how do I do that? Blender has a system which automatically switch cameras on and off on the timeline by using markers. So I'm going to create a marker by pressing letter M, and then I'm going to rename that marker such as camera 01 on. So we'll know where the camera switches itself on the scene, and it works perfectly. Now I'm going to move to another frame. Okay, here's where you can get some of the options for the timeline, and when you hover the timeline, then you can press M, because if you hover over a 3D view and you press M, you're going to get the layers menu. You don't want that. So hover to the timeline and then press M again, and now let's press Ctrl M to to rename that marker. And then we're going to press Ctrl B while the camera is selected. I select the camera right there, this camera, press the icon, then come here, then press Ctrl B. This will bind camera 02 to the marker camera 02 on. This way, if you can see right there on the viewer, the first camera will launch off the animation and the second camera will automatically switch once frame 23 it's reached. Now, like I mentioned before, you can even smooth out that those flip faces that look very weird by smoothing your skin modifier. Since it's a live effect, you can still come here and subdivide even more so you can get smooth results. So let's just save. Going to save this as a different name for the scene, so I will not overwrite anything I did previously. So let's play back. Let's play back. Right there, camera 01, then bam, camera 02 is activated. And this is the way it's going to look on the render. Now, the frame rate is pretty slow. Don't worry about that, we're going to fix that later. So right now we're going to go over to Blender 2.8, and right now you see here collections. So let's rename them layers, because that's the real intention of this these icons here, to organize everything by layers. And the icons over here are going to switch on and off the visibility of the objects. So once you get that clear, that collections really mean layers, just rename them and you should be all good. Now look at that. This is EEVEE. This is real-time representation of the reflective black goo material. And it looks just superb, outstanding. This is cycles as well. And yes, right now it's not EEVEE right now, it's rendering on cycles. I apologize, I thought this was the part where I was already working with EEVEE, but that comes some minutes ahead. Anyways, this part right here is working out pretty nice. Look at the detail on the timeline on 2.8. Developers have created a camera for the active camera, and then a lens for the active camera, and then a camera icon for the next camera to show. It's just amazing. I mean, attention to details is king on 2.8. Some people don't really like the mono icons. I really do think that they are necessary for other methods of viewing. Probably not on a full 4K HD monitor, UHD monitor, but well, that's another point of view that probably I'll discuss on another video. So we're here and I want to join this here and create a big area to watch this on EEVEE, just like I was commenting before. And you can see these strange artifacts for refraction. They are not refracting or reflecting rather things that are on the HDRI environment correctly. We can see the pixels on the reflections, but you can also check out, let me see, where is this parameter? Yes, the world, if you turn it out on 0, then you're going to get a complete dark image because this is being rendered using the light information from the HDRI world. But let me see if I can find it here. Okay, here it is. Now we're going to switch from the shader editor. I'm sorry, we're going to create a new window for the shader editor, and then we're going to come here where it says object, right here, yes. And then we're going to switch to world. This is the one that we are interested in. This is how we can change or manipulate whatever we have on the world tab over to the properties side panel. But this shader 3, the shader network, can help us create the effect that we are going to need to actually not use or make the background transparent directly on the viewport. Because if you have the option on film from the rendered properties and then switch from sky to transparent, then you're going to get a transparent background regardless of whatever image you're using. But if it's very annoying right here on the viewport, then you can also, because you have many ways to do this, but you can also set this shader network that I'm doing right now so that you have a color background, but it will render transparent. Why is this necessary? Because sometimes you really want to get advantages from the HDRI image only for reflections or refractions, but you don't really want the background to be rendered. So that's why we need to create this kind of shader network to manipulate the world background even further. So right now I'm going to create a node container. I'm going to rename it because the influence on this shader node, I'm going to press Ctrl P to make it parent, and then it automatically attaches itself to the node. And now you can see here that by moving this factor parameter, we are able to see the world, the HDRI world, or the color that I have right here on the background. Let me show you right there. See, I still get the reflections, but now I'm manipulating the world entirely different and separated from the original idea, which was the HDRI lightning. So I can have HDRI reflections with a different background world. Thanks to the Blender Stack community and the Blender artist community, that they really support artists like yourself, like me, in this kind of nifty tricks. I mean, it's just a lifesaver sometimes. So here we go, and we're going to try to render this at 4K resolution. I think it's just a little bit too obvious that this shader is broken. And let me see if a screen space reflection could fix this. Probably a bigger map, probably a reflection probe will help this. But I really wonder if modifiers are working tightly together on 2.8, because I believe, you know, this version is still on alpha. It's not on beta, and it's not quite finished. So we're gonna have to wait 2 more weeks, and up until the first 3 months of 2019 to see a solid release of Blender 2.8. So right now I'm going to play with probably shadows is what it's affecting here. Yeah, sort of the light not coming right. Um, Actually, it's the normals. You can see right there the normals are not behaving correctly. And let's see, what else are we missing here? Let me try the probe idea first. I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to add a light probe. Now this part I just wanted to do, and I didn't cut it out of the tutorial because I really want you to get a hang of how things are being worked on over to Blender 2.79 and 2.8. Blender 2.8 is by far a best tool to render things in real time. Even with these deformers, if I could just find out why I'm having this trouble, render frames on EEVEE only last about 40 to 30 seconds, while on cycles, while it's true that it's rendering depth of field and it's a necessary effect, other people create special passes to do the out of focus effect on post, but I really want to exploit the fact that we are using Blender 2.8 and its post production, its post effects rather, in a real production environment. So let me see if I can tweak this some more. Yeah, probably more subdivisions here will help, but it will really get your machine slow. So if you have the chance to play with this, probably try 5 or 4 subdivision levels to see how it looks for you. But this is all like the real solution on this, that it will really smooth out by using optimal display. It even has the checkbox there. And let's see if probably screen space reflection can help us some. But I really don't think so, because this is all a matter of how the skin modifier is working on 2.8. Let me switch this on to the highest values, so probably we'll get a better refraction. No. What about no samples? No, this is for viewport. Yeah, it's sort of fixed some of the things. Probably maybe in post we can, apply a blur. On pulse compositing is what I'm referring to. I think it's working right there. So yeah, basically if you have your EEVEE viewport working the way you like, then you go to film on the film tab from the render tab on the film section, and then you select that you do not want to render out with sky, but rather with a transparent background. So yes, much better. It looks pretty much like the way we wanted it. And so let's go back to the world, and right here on film, if you can see it right there, it's already set to sky. Now let's switch to transparent, and then it's going to render the transparent background, just like I mentioned before. So let's first try this with the original image, and you can see the reflections there. Now let's try the setup that we created, and the reflections stay. They do not go away, and you can switch your background color or even make it transparent by moving the alpha value here on the shader. So yeah, purple not really suitable in this case. Anyways, I'm going to select my location to save the render. Right now I'm getting prepared to render from EEVEE, and you don't see a render button here because you have to locate it all the way on the main menu. So let me get this as big as I can, and now come to render animation from the render menu right here on the top menu. If you do that render, whoops, EEVEE viewport is not rendering like we wanted it. Maybe this is something that the developers will fix later on. I'm pretty sure. Whatever we saw on the viewport is what we should expect on render time. Let's check out the modifier to see if we missed something there. But I don't think so. I think this is just something from switch to cycles to check out how much time this will delay. You can see it right there at only 144 samples. Yeah, sure. I even have depth of field. I didn't want to activate it on Blender, on EEVEE. Yeah, cycle looks pretty much decent. Takes a lot of time though. And yeah, all reflections are there. So right now I'm going to activate cubic, and also I'm going to show you what you can do using the Leonardo render. Right here I can delete my task. Right now I want to log on to the number of GPU computers, so I'm going to push here all the way up to somewhere to 38, probably 32. I can go even further, but let's try 32 first. 32 GPU modules working on GeForce, and I already installed the add-on. Maybe I'll cover extensively on my next tutorial on how Leonardo render works, but basically it's just so easy to use and it's so nice. You get the status bar down here over to the right side, and the interface is pretty simple. Whatever you submit with the buttons on the render tab from Blender 2.79, on Blender 2.8 I think they are about to announce the version for Leonardo render, the add-on, because the API just went out for Blender 2.8 this week. The developer's blog notes says it so. And once you submit your job, you're going to get this bar telling you about the status on how much time it's going to take for your data to be processed, or rather your scene to be processed. And I wanted to give a great thanks to the developers team on Leonardo render. They are amazing people. They are really really looking into the artist's best interests for render times, and they are also optimizing all their machines. They are really up to date. You can do geek talk with them because they really know their stuff. So I really recommend this service on the Leonardo render. So once frame 1 is already processed, you're gonna get this folder down here, so where you can click and then you see your frame process. Now if you open on any image viewer, you're not gonna see the transparency, so let's open up Photoshop and let's check it out there. I'm going to open the image, drag and drop, and then you should get a transparent background just like we set up on EEVEE. Don't forget, it was on film, on render, film, transparent, and then you can see the render with some alpha issues there, but I don't really care. And I bid you to try this Leonardo render service. Right now it's processing pretty fast. It's on frame number 3 from 120 frame total. And then I'm going to pause this because you know that you're going to have to wait some, I don't know, probably 15 minutes or so before this ends. It's pretty nice. It's pretty quick. It's pretty reliable. Whenever you encounter any error, it's because some of the GPU stuff code that goes from NVIDIA to the farms. Basically, you just start your render and then you're gonna get separated frames. They are rightly renamed, so you'll know whenever your folder processed each image or stopped at any given frame. So that's not a problem. Right now I'm going to go to the second part of this because I already have the render for the alien goo, which I'm satisfied with. And now I'm going to go into the grease pencil features using Blender 2.8. Now this really gets me excited because I've just finished a very long and very detailed training session with a comic effects, 2D comic effects made on Blender. Now that's just an amazing series. I'll plan to release some of that material to sneak peek and then comment about those exercises and files and effects later. And by the way, thank you very much, Antonio. He is a separate developer on the Grease Pencil branch that is continually developing new and amazing effects for Grease Pencil as a project, as a whole project on the Blender Institute, for the Blender Institute actually. So I'm going to create a new Grease Pencil object. I'm going to set my view onto the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad key, sorry, and then I'm going to switch off on the overlays for the 3D cursor, and I'm ready to start drawing. I'm going to create, I did already create the material for this, which is called, I think it's made with Blender material, just a white stroke, and I'm going to create some sort of, we can say, cow web, spider webs. And the idea here is to add this effect, the Grease Pencil effect, onto the final composite of the video for the alien goo. I hope YouTube really translate this all good. That is the letter E I'm going to create. It sort of have to have a web aspect to it, like made of threads. No, this doesn't work. Nope, this is not working. Oh, maybe this works. Again, I apologize because of the neighbors. They're really loud. I'm not editing this audio. I'm sorry for this time. But I just wanted to get this tutorial out as soon as I can. Blender conference is happening right now, so I know I'm aware. I should not be publishing any tutorials, but this one just could not wait any longer. I mean, there was so much potential on this tutorial that I really didn't want to stop any of you who would really want this kind of effect to be used as part of your reel. Actually, I'm pretty happy that you are looking at this, and then you can copy it and you can implement your own ideas on it. That really makes everyone on the Blender Institute happy that you can take this software and just push your ideas freely, being open source. Like, the official trainers are always there to help. I'm one, so I'm really glad when you comment this video. I know it's very long, but it had to be this long, so in order for you to get much details as you can, and you can ask anything and everything you would like about it, because that's the idea of the tutorials. Like, I've just heard on the Blender conference for the Spanish groups that certifications are not really that important in some countries. I don't share that idea. I think certifications are the best part of any software at all. I know some certifications are really, really expensive, like Houdini's or probably Maya. And they got their value, of course, because if someone is certified trainer on those kind of softwares, you know that you're going to ask anything to that technician or that artist, and he's going to reply with something that it's coherent, it's logical, it works. And even if it doesn't on the software, they will make sure to pass on your voice to the developers so they can listen to what the necessities of the industry are. And in that sense, that's why I enrolled to take the certification last year, and I'm pretty glad that I did because the community has been very responsive. I've conducted some surveys, I've done some implementations on the software itself on Blender 279. That's where the Blender XI mod theme was born. I'm still implementing some of the things, but It's taking time because I'm doing this all alone, and it takes code as well. And between that, the job, family, business meetings, time's really constraining sometimes. And let's continue to go with this effect. The idea here is to create another layer to separate the cobwebs that are going to be like floating in the wind. Actually, I don't remember how you can do this, but there's a way that you can put certain modifier grease pencil effects on the stack that can only affect certain layers. But right now I don't remember how I got that effect before. I know it's there, but the idea here will be that the cobwebs, being a separated layer, could be animated in a separate time as the original letters. So I'm just trying to create this as loosely as I can. I'm not really aiming for realism here. I just wanted to demonstrate that you can use grease pencil for other effects and not only for 2D drawing. You can also use grease pencil as a rigging tool, actually as a GUI development tool for rigging. I've done that in the past. I'll probably publish a video using grease pencil GUIs interfaces, graphic user interfaces, to rig and to drive some of the effects on the screen or some parameters on the meshes. It really becomes a huge potential tool for anyone that would like to try designing their own interfaces without going to geometrical or to polygonal. You can have freedom in strokes and shapes, and I think that's what makes any user interface much interesting if you're talking about 2D animation or 3D animation like the Toon Boom community. I mean, I've been a long time user of cartoon paint tool, but I left it somewhere around year 2002, I think it was. And since then, I've been looking for a really good 2D tool that I can use, and even the better if I can use that tool integrated on a 3D space, on a 3D environment, and Blender just fits the bill. In that case, you can switch your camera view to ortho view, ortho front view, and then you have a canvas working on X and Y axis, which is what you would really look for whenever you're drawing in 2D. Actually, this flatness on the planes, restriction on the planes. Now, some of the guys in the community have told me, have been telling me, hey, why don't you create some more buttons for the grease pencil interface? And I think that's been announced already, and that's why I have stopped on that thread, because I already read that they are considering adding more buttons for the interface navigation on the grease pencil, specifically on the grease pencil objects on the draw mode, and I believe that's the current path they're taking. Okay, so right now we're going to use the time offset, which came out this week. And the time offset, the general idea on that is that whatever animation you have, you will select the layer you're interested in animating. Right now I only have two keyframes on this animation. That's probably why it's not working. I want to offset it so that the cobwebs move at certain speed, and then the words, the letters, will move at a different speed, but it will not work. One of the developers, actually Antonio, one of the developers for Grease Pencil, already told me that they are not compatible. Time offset is not compatible, and that I should use from the build modifier the time offset parameter, which you can see right here. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the offset as in displace. Obviously on 2D we will not call it a displace, but rather an offset. This is very important for when you're creating probably some after images you know, copying the previous layer, and then you want to reveal them or draw them or create them with a certain offset in space, because if you can see here, you can scale it, offset scale, offset rotate, and offset locate. Now let's name this as Blender, so that we don't get confused, and let's create another new grease pencil object, and in this one we're going to name it made with, and then finally made with. Now why we name this 3 level things? On the outliner it's a scene level, on the properties it's that data level, and finally on the layer level it's at object level, really. So yes, that's why Blender has this I don't want to say it this way, but it's a duplicated way to create things, but it really comes handy whenever you're embedding, or rather appending, files or objects or materials. That's where it really shines and pays off, because scene organization contains the data part of it, and this data part of it can identify objects, and those objects at the same time can identify certain properties. This is why you sometimes create a particle effect at scene level, and then you need to create a particle effect at object level. Right now it's kind of confusing, but believe me, it has huge advantages to work in this way. So let's try some more lettering, and the build effect must be used when you are placed on the first frame. Right now, if you notice, I'm on frame 117, and if I apply the build effect, it's gonna take frame 1 as frame 117, and our animation finishes at 120, so that means we're only going to see the build effect for 3 frames. So I bid you, please do not make this mistake I'm doing right here. You should always animate or create your grease pencil animations or strokes always on frame 0, or at least on frame 1. Now I want to demonstrate what happens if you do not pay attention with that. See? 1, 2, 3, gone. 1, 2, 3, gone. The effect, the build effect, is going to only appear on the last 3 frames. So let's delete this. Now let's recreate the effect again. Even if you offset it, you will not get it right. So let's try again. Set yourself on frame number 1, create a new grease pencil object, name it accordingly, and now let's create the lettering. Kind of like this diamond shaped letters. Yeah, I think this can work. Made with, I want this to look like witch, because we're somewhere around that infamous date of the year, which everyone goes like crazy. Okay, made with, now let me stylize this some more. Oh, by the way, I'm using a digital tablet, so that's why my strokes, if I draw easily, they will get really soft, and if I draw and really press onto the digital tablet, you will get a thicker result, even though you can switch and change these lines by switching on to the sculpt mode, which I have previously presented on other tutorials, and then you can use your digital pen, your right button on your digital pen, to use the sculpt tools, and then you can simplify, smooth, or thicken your lines. Now I'm going to apply the build modifier, and since I was on frame 1, now it will play back correctly. Now look at that. Pretty amazing. I really like it. I really like this kind of effect. Now you can imagine how much potential there is for lettering on using Blender. Real-time engine with EEVEE. Let's save that sequence. I'm going to create a new folder. It's going to be called made with Blender. And I'm going to save it as PNG format. And I'm going to switch to the EEVEE render engine and EEVEE shaded view. I'm going to set my front ortho view, my current camera view, by pushing the same shortcuts. Control Alt 0. 0 on the numpad, of course. Now I'm going to tell it to render a transparent background from the render properties. And that's it. Now let me separate this so you can see how the render will look in the final work. So let's see, I need to go to, I think it's on render, and I need to set from the top menu, render, display mode, image editor. This is where we select anything and everything we want to see at render time on the image editor. So right now I'm going to select my size, I think with HD will do, and then I'm going to go to render animation. But if you press render, you're just going to render the first frame now. Make sure that you really press render animation. So there you have it. Down there you can see now your rendered status bar and how it progresses for the rendering. Oops, let me stop it by pushing escape. Now let's, much better. Now I can see the entire word completed, not being cut by the camera. And you can see on the lower part of the Blender status bar that the render is going pretty much faster than anything we've seen before on cycles. Well, I'm sorry, I'm exaggerating, but I just really love EEVEE. What can I say? So let's go for the compositing part. Yes, of course I could have composited on Blender 2.8, but I just wanted you to know that sometimes things and the effects will work differently when you render out from EEVEE than if you're composing them from Blender. And so right now this part is going to be all about the post effects, and we previously used a web distortion effect on Blender. We also have that here on After Effects, of course. It's a very old effect. Yeah, that was Eddie, you know, going chasing bad guys. Eddie from the Venom movie. Anyways, let's go back to the compositing. So right now I'm working on Blender. I'm working on After Effects to get the right cinematic look. And I guided myself using their palette, I don't know, potato. And I noticed that they have this teal blue and dark, very contrasty looks for the shadows. So I use some of the filters that I have here on After Effects, and then I got this look. And coloring is something very important on anything and everything you do on post effects, or rather compositions, because if you don't communicate with color the story that you would like, then this could be, I don't know, tendrils of a submarine creature tentacles, you know. But no, this is a blue teal Venom-like color graded Hollywood professional level tutorial, so we surely want to get as close as we can to that frame of reference. Color correction on DaVinci has been really efficient. Most of the productions I know on the medium are using DaVinci, and it outsells, it outgrows, it outlasts everything that I've previously known. Even Lustre. I worked on a Autodesk Lustre, potato again. Lustre station, you know, with all those knobs and balls and color correction knobs, monitor grading and stuff. And I really I was really amazed once I saw how easy it was to create presets, color matching, skin tones, I don't know, you name it, on color corrections on DaVinci. I think that's one of the goals that I'm totally aiming this year. Once I get down the OSHIO and raw workflows that hopefully on the Blender conference have been explained thoroughly. I really want to get that down from Blender. Although I've been working on Filmic from the past 2 years now, and it really gives amazing results on raw files, on the whole spectrum. I mean, you don't get anything like cut out of the spectrum there. You get every detail and every color, every shadow, every neatness of anything that is standing on the shadow. You can recover it. I mean, it's Filmic is just the magic one we've been waiting to place Blender on the map, on the color grading systems, and also for the color grading workflows. So you can see right there, we went from the image on the right onto the image to the left. I mean, it's a huge difference. So please, 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 it's not the tool that makes the artist. You really need to get down to the concepts on the basis of the effects, whatever you would like to create. And everything else is just a tool, just a medium to get there. So I really hope you've liked this tutorial. I really enjoyed narrating through it. And don't forget to subscribe and always check out my profile. Thank you very much.